Hello and welcome to the Try Talking Sport podcast, hosted by me, Joanne Murphy. Whether you are an athlete, adventurer, endurance enthusiast, or simply have an interest in sport, you have come to the right place for inspiration, encouragement, motivation, and as always, plenty of entertainment. What a few weeks it has been. From gallivanting around Vienna, Bratislava and Budapest with my mum and sister for 11 days last month, to doing my first triathlon in 6 years at Loughoutre Castle Triathlon and Multisport Festival 2 weekends ago. Yes, I did a triathlon. Whoop! To racing the Galway Tri Clubs, TTs and training for Mondello 24 with Cycling Connacht. It has been full on and I am loving it. It really has been all go and this fine weather has been lovely. Not very conducive to sitting at a laptop, but fabulous for training and getting outdoors. Speaking of outdoors, how great is it to have the racing season well and truly kicked off? I'm still buzzing from racing at Loughoutre and cannot wait to race again. Not sure if I'll step up to the Olympic or stick with the sprint, but the bottom line is, I'm back. I'll have a race report on Loughoutre on the website over the coming days. The short version is, I was given the opportunity to race. I grabbed it with both hands, making a last minute decision to race the sprint and literally ripped off the racing plaster. I gave it welly for the crack and I loved it. And I did much better than I even expected. It was so much fun and the atmosphere at the castle across the weekend was super, helped along by the incredible sunshine we had for the 2 days of racing. Truth be told, if I could have raced a triathlon last weekend, I would have. But I was on the microphone and it was another incredible day of racing. Well done to everyone who raced at home and abroad over the past few weeks, and a special shout out to everyone who either raced their first triathlon or got back into racing after a big break. Let this be the start or restart of an incredible adventure in triathlon. Next up for me is Mondello 24 with the Cycling Connacht team. I am thrilled to make the team for the event. After racing with the Women's Commission team last year, I was delighted that Cycling Connacht were putting in a women's team this year. We have had lots of fun along the way with our meetups and our time trials. 8 riders from 7 clubs in the province have been selected for the team and the event is shaping up to be another great weekend. I'll be double jobbing again as a team rider and as the event MC, and I'm really looking forward to seeing everyone on and off the track across the event. There's been a big interest in the race this year, so if the weather gods play ball, it's going to be another super 24 hours of racing. This weekend kicks off the Ironman season in the UK and Ireland with Ironman 70.3 Staffordshire taking place on Sunday. If you are racing Ironman this season, be sure to check out some of the articles on the Try Talking Sport website under the Performance Hub tab, which might save you time, stress and hassle when packing your bags for racing and getting the final preparations underway for race weekend. Before we dive into this week's episode, big shout out to Emma Porter, who has gone mad for gravel after her epic success at the Track at 360 in Girona. Last Saturday, she took on the Unbound gravel race in Kansas in the elite women's race, completing 200 miles of gravelly adventure. You can check out her initial abbreviated race report on the Try Talking Sport website and the socials. Finally, for those of you who are avid fans of the podcast, you may have noticed there's been a bit of a gap between this episode and the previous one. With my announcing schedule kicking in for the summer and lots of travel with that, I have decided to release the episodes a little less frequently over the coming weeks. There will still be episodes, I promise. They'll be out on a Wednesday at 3 p.m. They'll just be released a little more ad hoc, but will still feature amazing guests and fascinating stories in sport and beyond. As always, don't forget about our discount on Newasan products. If you haven't checked them out yet, go to www.newasan.com to see their range and use the code TTS15 to get 15% discount online. I have been motoring through the CBD muscle gel like a lunatic the past few weeks and the legs are feeling good, using it specifically after some of the very hard efforts on the bike. Now to this week's episode with Olympian David Gillick, 400 metre indoor and outdoor Irish record holder who has dedicated a huge portion of his life to his sport on the running track, representing club and country on the world stage. His sporting career as an elite athlete saw him make history when he won Ireland's first sprint gold medal in 76 years when he won the 2005 European Indoor Championship. He retained that title in 2007 and in 2008 he fulfilled his dream of becoming an Olympian. The following year he competed at the Berlin World Championships, finishing 6th in the 400 metre final, fulfilling another significant goal he had set himself in sport. His successful athletics career was speckled with some disappointment and injury along the way, and when you consider the minute margins between winning a race and not winning a race over 400 metres, you can only imagine the intense pressure cooker within which athletes at this level perform. Wrapping up his career as an elite athlete in 2013, David moved from the bubble of his life as a full-time athlete with all the structure, routine and training that his life involved into the real world and struggled to come to terms with his life beyond sport. He has openly shared his struggles with his mental health and the importance of getting back to sport for him and back to running, to what he really loves. This October he will take on his second marathon at the Irish Life Dublin City Marathon. Winner of Celebrity MasterChef and one of 3 finalists in RTE's Ultimate Hell Week, the father of 3 is a 2-time best-selling author who is passionate about sport, food, promoting a healthy body and mind, and has become a vocal advocate on mental health. This is a super insightful and fun chat with David, who shares insight into his life in sport and beyond. Now go grab a cuppa and enjoy the show. David Gillick, welcome to the Try Talking Sport podcast. Delighted to finally get you on the show. You're a very busy man.
Cheers for having me on. Looking forward to the chat, and hopefully I'll be able to part some of my wisdom maybe onto the listeners. But no, cheers for having me on.
You're one of the busiest men on the planet. You're doing everything from you're an athlete, a dad, an author, a Hell Week winner, a MasterChef winner, an advocate for athletes, an advocate for mental health. You're on committees, you're ambassador for so many brands. How do you keep juggling everything in the air? Or do you?
Well, do I? Like, it's funny, okay, because as you're kind of listing them off there, I'm kind of going, God, yeah, like I am doing a lot. But I suppose, like, essentially, I'm a freelancer. You know, I work for myself. So things come in peaks and troughs. And it's probably taken me nearly like 8 years to actually accept that. And through that, I'm able to kind of maybe go with the flow of life. And, you know, I'm very, very lucky with the opportunities that have presented themselves. You know, I never once, when I stepped off the track nearly 10 years ago, I actually retired originally 10 years ago this year, I never thought I'd be doing what I'm doing now. Never in a million years. And, you know, I did work full time initially. I did nearly kind of 2 to 3 years working full time, and I wasn't really kind of happy with what I was doing. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I kind of just thought, you know, I need to press pause. I need to take a bit of time out. And I suppose off the back of MasterChef and off the back of running, I was working with 1 or 2 brands, and I kind of said, look, I've enough to survive by doing these gigs. So I said I'll do that for a while, and then just things kind of began to kind of snowball. And like one of the things you mentioned there, like I do like giving back to the sport, because it's probably taken me a couple of years to actually now look back at my sport with fondness and be grateful. And, you know, I feel like it's my duty to maybe give back to the sport, and, you know, involved in certain committees like the anti-doping committee. I was involved with the Athletes Commission, the OFI, and now kind of with young kids myself, I'm beginning to coach a little bit. So yeah, like it's a lot. And, you know, my wife, Charlotte, would be always giving out to me going, you're never home. But it's peaks and troughs. And I think that's the key with it. You know, I'm going to have busy times of the year, and then other times that, you know, I do a lot of corporate work. So that kind of quietens down during the summer and kind of around Christmas time. So I know there's ups and downs, and, I keep telling myself, like, you know, I'll get a bit of time off.
It is super, isn't it, really, to be able to create and manage your own schedule. You really are your own boss at the end of the day. You're not in a 9-to-5 Monday to Friday. Something tells me that was never, ever going to be the plan for you anyway, really. And isn't it just amazing that, like, having come from being an athlete at the very top level, that you've been able to carve a niche for yourself in sport, in community, and doing something that you're absolutely loving.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. I'm doing something that I love, and a lot of the work that I do doesn't feel like work, and that's a huge thing to be able to say. Like, again, I never sat down with a pen and paper and kind of went, right, this is what I want to do. A lot of things kind of happened organically, and I suppose when I look back over the last couple of years, I think the key part of that is building relationships and actually being able to communicate. I don't have an agent. You know, I kind of do a lot of my own stuff myself. And I think through that, I've been able to really kind of, you know, just have key relationships and work on those relationships. And that's helped. And that's created a lot of opportunity in terms of some of the work that I'm doing. And you know, like, to be involved in sports still at this point, and I've probably gone through various changes, and, you know, I've taken some opportunity. I've done things and then kind of thought, oh God, I don't know if this is for me. You know, when I initially worked I thought this was it. This is me for the next kind of, until I retire, at the age of 65 or so. And then you kind of have those moments where you're kind of thinking, is this really what I want to do? And then you have the fear, well, I can't change. And that did kind of hold me back. And even working for myself, I'll be honest, like January is always a bit like, oh my God, what way is this year going to go? Maybe this is the year I need to go and get a real job. And I've had those moments I've had every year, and it's daunting. And it's not easy working for yourself, but at the same time, the fact that you are your own boss, you are making your own money, you can then kind of maybe kind of manipulate your year a little bit. And particularly with 3 young kids, it's great now that they're at the age when, they finish school and they have their holidays, that I can work around that and be around a little bit more. And that's probably of huge importance to me right now, is to try and get that work-life balance that I'm able to spend time with my kids. And that's kind of one of the things I really want to do.
And you're still able to embrace sport. You're training now for the Dublin Marathon, which probably takes priority over work at times, even though you're not going to tell your clients.
You're really, really going to show me up here. When I was training full time and over 400s, I was definitely priority number one. And then slowly but surely, I got married and you have kids. It's kind of, I'm dropping in the pecking order. But the truth be told, of course, my running is priority. That's the one thing I try and fit in. But I love it. And again, doing a marathon for me was probably one of the ultimate goal. Coming from 400 meters, a sprinter. People used to say to me, "Oh, but you're a runner. So you can do you run a 2.5 hour marathon." And I'm scratching my head going, "You have no idea." There's GAA players that would probably be better conditioned to run marathons than I would, because my whole physiology was all geared around 44, 45 seconds, and that was it. So to change all of that was a massive process. But I suppose kind of 2 years ago, I was doing a bit of cyclocross, which fantastic, loved it. And then I realized I'm not fit. I'm not aerobically fit. And I said, right, I'm going to try and get fit. And I started doing a bit more running. And then I was like, this is boring. I need a goal. So then I was like, I'm going to do the marathon, typical stretch goal. There was no 10Ks or halves. I was going full hog here. And then I was like, I'm going to try and run under 3 hours. And then people were like, you're not going to be able to do that. And I was like, right, I'm going to get a coach. So a good buddy of mine, Edmonton Levy, is a coach. He was helping me out. And we just went on that journey. And I loved it. And what I loved about it was I loved the process. I love the fact that I have a coach who just goes, right, here's what you need to do. Go and do it. I didn't have to think about it. I just followed the orders. And that brought me back to, I suppose, the way it was for me, as an elite athlete and training and having a little goal. And through that, then my week had a bit of structure. And training for an autumn marathon is great. Springtime, summertime, the weather's good. And, the long days, you're out early. And I just loved it. And it's been a massive part. And even Charlotte turned around to me this year and she's like, are you going to do Dublin again? And I was like, how do I answer this? And before I did, she said, I think you should, because you're a better person for it. And that's where sport and running, and that's the beauty about running. There's so many different levels. I'm not competing with anyone. I just want to challenge myself and get the reward of that. And I love it. And I think, from my own kind of mental health and physical well-being, I love running. It's simple.
You've been quite public and open about your struggles with mental health post your elite career. And for a lot of people, getting out running or doing triathlon or training, it's so important to be outside or to be exercising, whatever it is that drives those endorphins to support and protect your mental health.
Well, 100%. And, for me, all the research is there in terms of exercise and how it makes us feel, physical well-being, mental well-being. And for me, I struggled with that change. That was the biggest thing that I struggled with, was that literally that my career ended. And then 2 weeks later, I'm waking up and I'm thinking, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? Who am I? What am I good at? And, even socially as well, I was probably 10 years behind my mates who kind of finished college and got onto jobs, and I'm starting way down. You're thinking, how am I ever going to get up to that level? And how am I going to afford a house and bills? And all these kind of things start flooding your mind. And it was just overwhelming. And I wasn't exercising at all. I always reference Andre Agassi's book, The Open, where he talks about he hated tennis. I went through that with athletics. I hated athletics and I resented it because it put me in the situation I was in. I didn't get the opportunity to say goodbye to the sport on my terms. I wanted to go to, Beijing, to London, then go to Rio and retire. I made one Olympics and it all ended, through injury. So I couldn't even run. That was the reality of where I was at. So I was resentful. And And then you panic. I took a job. I focused on money. I thought that's what I needed to do. I wasn't content in that. So I said yes to absolutely everything. And then I was doing stuff on the side, kind of weekends. And before I knew it, it was like 7 days a week. And I kept saying to myself, I kept saying yes to things because I was like, oh, maybe this is the answer. This is the thing. This is the thing that's going to fix everything. So my mental health completely and utterly deteriorated in that. I wasn't looking after myself in terms of diet. I wasn't even sleeping. I had insomnia. And I actually remember I broke out in psoriasis because I was so stressed. And then, the reality was in my house when I was at home, with the people that mattered most, I was angry. I was irritable. I was just fed up. I was overwhelmed. Then I'd leave the house and I put the mask on to be the person that I thought I should be in front of others. And like, that is so, so tiresome. It was just that constant argument in my head. You're a fraud, you're an idiot, you're this, you're that. And that internal dialogue. And, the biggest change for me, I did go through a process of counseling. And then I actually I began to understand me. I began to kind of realize that like, I've been running since I was like 6 or 7. I joined my local running club when I was 7, Dundrum, South Dublin. And I missed it. And I was grieving, if anything. I was going through that like loss of something that was a huge part of me and gave me so much confidence and self-worth. And then I realized, I got to get back running. And it coincided with going to counseling and talking about things and actually begin to understand. So now, like, how do I manage my mental health? I exercise on a regular basis. I try and get outdoors as much as I can. I try and get the kids outdoors as much as I can. And I feel better about myself. And through kind of like exercise, I want to eat better. I'm sleeping better. And I feel like I'm in control. And that's a great thing. I go for a run and I feel better after it. It's that simple. And then I like having little targets, little goals along the way. And in terms of what I'm doing now in running is like 5Ks, 10Ks, park runs, and then leading up to the marathon. And I think that way you have a bit of structure. And I feel good about myself. And that's the thing. It's that kind of self-empowerment. And what can you do to help yourself? And I still go to counselling, which is very important. And I'm back doing something that I love and I've always loved, which is running.
Interesting there. Some of the words that you mentioned were taking back control and empowerment and structure. And you would imagine at the time when you retired back in 2013 that everything was out of control because you really didn't know where you were going or what you were doing. And you identify so much as an athlete and your life is just so in a bubble in a way when you think about it, that somebody else is controlling your life at the time, maybe your coach or your training, and your focus 100% focused on your sporting goals. But you've no control then when you leave that environment. We had Shane Williams, the Welsh international rugby player, on the podcast, the previous episode, and he spoke as well about how difficult it was to move beyond that professional level of sport into literally the unknown.
Yeah. Or as I term, the real world. And
well, yeah,
you're not really prepared for it in many ways. And when you're kind of, participating in sport and, you're in a group, you have a coach, you're meeting them every single day, you're sitting there with your coach, you're mapping out. Like for me, it was every week, every month, every year, every 4-year Olympic cycle was pretty much mapped out. I knew exactly what I was doing. And I knew that like, in September, I get a couple of weeks off. That was my holiday time. And then you're back into it at the end of September. And every day you woke up, you went to training, you were around like-minded people and you had a goal. You had a goal and that was your session. Here's your target times. And it was all building up towards a championship. And everything revolved around that. It wasn't, yes, it was a sport, but it was a lifestyle choice. And I loved it. And that's the thing. I absolutely loved it. I wouldn't change it for the world. It was such a privilege to be in that environment. But the biggest challenge was, okay, you come to the end of that. And then you wake up one day and you're kind of thinking, I remember waking up on a Saturday morning and turning to Charlotte and going, what do normal people do on a Saturday? And I don't want to sound condescending, but for my whole entire life, I trained on a Saturday morning. And I always remember like around springtime where, suddenly the buds and the leaves come on the trees. And like, that's when, the butterflies become, because the season's just around the corner, the anticipation. And then suddenly you're kind of looking at trees going, like, I should be what this is weird. I'm not nervous. I've no season to look forward to. And then the leaves change, when it gets to autumn. And that's when you go, all right, I'm going back into training. This wasn't happening. And I know like the season, it changed. Like it was just weird. It was crazy. And that had a profound impact on me. And I think that transition out of a structured environment where you're around like-minded people, you're always got a clear goal, you have a clear purpose, to then suddenly waking up and that doesn't I could turn up, I could be hungover on a Saturday or a Sunday and it didn't matter anymore. You know?
So what do normal people do on a Saturday morning, David?
They go to park run now.
Well, this is it.
Yeah.
Let's go back a little bit, back to the young David Gillick. And where did this interest in sport come from, or how did you end up running at the age of 6 and 7? And let's talk about your career right through, because you did have a very successful career.
Yeah, like running, I suppose, was always in our family. I'm the youngest of 4. I've got 2 brothers, Tony,
Were you
John.
spoiled as a kid, by the way? As the youngest of 4, were you spoiled as a kid?
Well, they would say I was spoiled. I would say no.
Were you the pet?
There was probably that. Yeah, apparently now my mum will kill me for saying that, but I wasn't planned. So maybe they feel sorry for me, you know. Couple of years between me and my sister. But no, look, you know, I had a great upbringing. Like, you know, both my parents worked. My mum was a nurse for nearly 40 years, working nights. You know, she was heavily involved in sport. Basketball was her sport, and I pretty much grew up on the side of a basketball court. All my brothers and my sister, they all participated in sport. And again, we were blessed to grow up in an area, Ballantyre, where, you know, from Ballantyre St. John's GA to Bradford Rovers soccer to Dundrum DSD Athletic Club, literally at the end of my road. And like, again, being the youngest, I was just thrown in the car and like, right, we're going here, we're going there. You know, my parents, like, dad was a taxi driver every weekend. They were all doing sport and I'd just be there. And I think from an early age, sport was just normal. Like, I can remember going training with my mum basketball, and they were short a player, so they threw me in as a young lad. You know, it was great. You know, I can remember that vividly, and maybe that's it. Maybe it kind of sticks in your head as a young age. You know, it's you model what people around you are doing and you mirror that. And sport was always in our house, and it was always on the TV, it was always on the radio. And again, in my area, I mentioned DSD, the Athletic Club, was at the end of a road, and that was my first kind of interest into athletics, but also in my school. I can remember doing the Coming to Bun School at a young age, the primary school sports here in Dublin, did those, and then through that joined the Athletic Club, and then it kind of went from there, you know. And like, as a young lad, it was just fun, it was a bit of crack. Did I, like, look, I was the fastest in my class, so, you know, from the competitive sense, maybe, you know, I wanted that and I enjoyed that. And it just went from there. And like, I suppose I never really thought about, like, look, you daydream. As a young kid, you would daydream. I used to watch Sonia Sullivan, you know, winning races and doing laps of honor. And I can remember kind of, you know, I remember my brother came into the kitchen one time and I was like, I was doing my celebration if I won a race. And he remember looking at me going, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, nothing, you know. And like, maybe that's it. You're inspired, you're motivated. And I did various sports throughout my teenage years. Went on to St. Benilda's College in secondary school in Kilmacud, and played an awful lot of GAA, a bit of soccer, but cross country running was in there as well. And again, kind of kept me involved in it. And I suppose I progressed through the years, but I didn't make any like underage international events. I'm probably a little bit short on that, but I kept at it, and I was probably a little bit of a late developer. And then kind of in my late teens, that's when I really began to make inroads into athletics. I was getting faster, and I was probably beginning to find my event as well. You know, I was quick. I had an element of strength, but not quick enough for maybe a 100, 200, and not maybe strong enough for maybe an 800 or 15. So I fell in around about that 400 meter area. And that was probably the start of a good journey, you know. And like, to be fair, I went to the World Juniors in 2002 as part of a relay team. And that was just a game changer because it was such a cool experience. You know, Usain Bolt was about nearly 2 years younger than me, but he was competing in Jamaica, packed stadium, the atmosphere. And I can remember coming back from that going, you know what? I want more of that. That's what I want to do. And I played my last year with St. John's Ballantyre. And then I packed in the GAA and kind of focused more on the athletics. And again, it wasn't until kind of, 2004, I got a break, the European Indoors. I managed to win that. And that gave me huge confidence then. Like, you kind of think, right, I'm on a different level now. But I was still in college in Dublin. Like, I was probably hungover for every Friday for about 4 years. I had the fun, and then 2006, I finished from college and I had a shocking performance at the European Outdoor Championships in Gothenburg. I came last in my semi-final, and that hurt because I had a bit of success prior and probably expectation and pressure and all that kind of stuff just overwhelmed me, at that moment. And that was a huge game changer, because I remember coming away from those championships going, that's not me. That performance is not me. I need to change things. And that's when I moved to Loughborough in 2006. And that was probably the real kind of step up in terms of, right, it's big time athletics now. I was training with better people. I was in an environment where I was challenged every day. And it made me really kind of make that choice. Like, is this a sport or is this a lifestyle? And I chose kind of lifestyle. This is it. This is what I want to do. And I really kind of went after it then.
And how did you deal with the pressure? Your races, they're only 400 meters. But you mentioned earlier, 45 seconds. Like, you miss out on a spot in the final by like nothing of a second.
Yeah.
You miss out on a medal at a World Games or an Olympic qualification, or like, it's insane. I don't know how you dealt with it, or how did you deal with it?
Yeah, like, there's certain races that I still run in my head. 2010 European Championships, I was probably arguably the favourite for it. But we were all very close in the rankings now, to be fair. But like, I missed the gold medal by 0.2 and I missed the bronze by 0.02. So pretty much a blanket finish. But that's sprinting, you know what I mean? And that's you're aware that it's always going to be close, and it's fine margins. And it's tough. Like, it's really, really tough. And, again, in those circumstances, you try and run your own race. You know what I mean? You can't run someone else's race because it's so short. And if you do that, the chances are you'll mess up your own kind of strategy. And that's something you got to learn over time. When you mature in your event, you got to know how to run your event. And it's fine margins. Like, if I went through 200 meters in, let's say 21.4, okay, I'm trying 21.4 seconds. If I went through in 21.2 or 21.1, I'll mess up my whole race. I'll pretty much die in the last 50 meters. Whereas if I go through in like 21.6 or 21.7, so 0.3 slower, I'll probably run out of track. You know what I mean? Coming home too fast. So, like, that's where, the measurements, and you have to fine tune that, and you have to really kind of, understand what works for you in a race, and then run your own strategy. And sometimes you get it right, sometimes you get it horribly wrong. And there's plenty of races where I got it wrong, but I got it right in a few as well. And I think that, to be honest with you, that comes down to good communication with your coach and understanding that, what do I need to do, and your training and all that. And I'd always say, kind of, in athletics, like, one of the greatest quotes I ever heard was like, you first and foremost, you coach the athlete, then you coach the event. And that's very, very important. And I think as well, it's that kind of that feedback, and I was very lucky when I was in England, coach Nick Dakin, where he understood me, he understood me. And, other athletes maybe didn't need the arm around the shoulder as much, but I was the type of athlete that's what I liked. And I'd seek that, and he would give it to me. And that was very reassuring in terms of my training, my progress, and also dealing with the setbacks, debrief and understanding, okay, well, what worked, what didn't work, what do we need to improve upon? And that's an ongoing cycle. And I think if you can have that in your environment and have the people around you that you can trust, that can help with those little defeats and those little 0.1s and 0.01s that sometimes go astray, But in saying that, Joanne, I've won races by 0.1 and 0.01. So, like, it's a two-way street.
There's the internal pressure you're put on yourself, because you might have missed out on something by the 0.1 or the 0.01, or celebrated having beaten others. But what about that pressure when you come home and you've had a great race, you've put yourself in the mix, first time being featured by RT and the newspapers as like, wow, David Gillick has just done X, Y, and Z. And then you come home and there's this extra level of expectation, but it's external expectation. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, like, I got to be honest, like 2005, when I won in Madrid, I wasn't prepared for success. And to be brutally honest, I don't think my sport was prepared for success at that moment in time. I think, previous winners, like the likes of like Sonia Sullivan, the really, superstars of the sport, Irish icons, they probably weren't necessarily based in Ireland. They were based maybe in the States and stuff like that. So it was easier to kind of like do your job and then kind of hide away from all the hype and the expectation. Whereas, in 05, I can remember coming back to the airport, and, next minute there was an announcement on the plane, and there was a guy with bagpipes brought me the whole way through. And I was like, where's my bags? He's like, don't worry about that, we'll come back and get them. And you know what I mean? It was just all different. And then you're walking through the airport and people are looking at you, and, Like it was strange. And look, I was young at the time. You kind of lap it up. It's great, fantastic. I went into college then the Tuesday, and the lecturers were like, "Oh, well done," and you had all that stuff. But I can remember, like, suddenly then there was questions. It was just a constant kind of like, "Oh, when are you racing? Next, and you're going to win the Olympics and all." And like it was like people who maybe didn't know a whole lot about athletics suddenly knew me and were like, "Oh, Jesus, your man's he's apparently a bit of a good runner." Like, and then it was the questions, and I didn't like, not that I didn't like it, I just didn't know how to deal with it. And it was just all a bit overwhelming. Like, and then I remember the neighbor came in and was like, we knew you were a good runner. I didn't think you were that good. Like, and it was just
typical Irish compliment.
Typical, absolutely. Like, and then like the late show and all this sort of crack. And then it was almost just like people had suddenly had an interest. And maybe at that time we didn't have a star in athletics. And I can remember watching the news when I came home, because at that point I recorded everything because I'd never had a whole lot. So, Dad was all the papers and we're recording the news and rewatching the news. And I remember they said something like a bubbling athletic career. And straight away I remember like, bubbling, shit, that means I have to win again. That means more. And you know what I mean? It's kind of like, whoa, like I couldn't enjoy it. I couldn't enjoy it because straight away it was like, right, the worlds are coming up. And then suddenly people were talking about, the world championships in Helsinki. And then you're going, oh my God, like now I have to really go here and perform. And yeah, it was all a bit weird. And I think sometimes in sport, we're preparing for like maybe when things don't go well. And then it's like, okay, what do we do? But do we actually prepare for success? And I think it's a huge area that, things are going well. How do we manage this? How do we manage the external expectations and maybe the noise that goes on? And it was hard. And I got to be honest, that probably 2006 didn't go well for that reason. Going into the European Championships, I was the one who was like leading the team supposedly, and he's going to do this and he's going to do that. And none of it happened. And then you're kind of going from a high down to like, he's a one-hit wonder. Like, and then you're kind of questioning everything. And it was hard. And I think in those moments, when I look back, it's probably having people who understand what success is about and understand kind of how you deal with that. And like, saying no as well is probably the hardest thing because, I was living in the area, I grew up, and you have this, can you do this? Can you go here? Can you go there? And like, as much as you want to, is it conducive to success? Is it conducive to training? It wasn't, but like, if I didn't, I was an arsehole.
Yeah. And I suppose the other thing as well is we see the successes and we see the disappointments on the outside, but we don't see the journey that you've gone through between races to get to those successes or whatever the result may be. Indoor and outdoor, 400 meters, you still have the Irish record for both of those, don't you?
Yeah. They're still there, yeah.
Yeah, they're standing a long time at this stage.
Yeah, like the indoor one, most recent one was 2007. No, sorry, 2009. Yeah, I think it's
that's a long time.
Yeah. It's funny actually because I forget about them. It's weird. Like they crop up now and again, like, but I always have to do kind of the maths on it and actually think back going, well, when did I actually run that? Yeah, 2009, 2007, I set the Irish record, 45:52. And then 2 years later, I ran the exact same time. And then outdoors that year as well, 2009, I ran 44:77, and that's the outdoors. So like that year was obviously a great year for me. And like indoors and outdoors, like there is a difference. Like indoors obviously takes place earlier in the year. It's a completely different track. It's 200 meters. So you have to do 2 laps. You break from your lanes. It's on banked kind of a banked track as well. So it's a little bit more physical, which I absolutely loved. It's a different strategy. You got to get out hard and you got to literally just go for it. Whereas outdoors, you're in your own lane. Nobody can touch you. So it's a different kind of strategy. But like, at the end of the day, it's 400 meters and it's the same distance. So indoors, and people would look at me and go, oh, you're too big for indoors. Like I'm 6'2". So people would say, oh, you're tall for indoors, but I love the competitive side of it. I love the fact that there's a bit of rough and tumble and, lads be coming in on top of you. And I responded well for that. And I also didn't have to like change my training a whole lot in the winter to get a performance. Like weight wise, I didn't have to kind of bring that down. I didn't have to taper a whole lot. And I began to understand that like, I can run off high volume and run fast off high volume. And then that enabled me not to really change a whole lot in the winter, because the outdoors was always the big goal. That's where the big championships are, Olympics, Worlds, and all the major championships outdoors. So, it's nice having records. I'm not going to lie. It's nice having records. And probably like I'm retired now nearly 10 years. So when I first retired, you want your records to last forever. But now you kind of go, I actually kind of, maybe I kind of want them to be broken a bit, because I'd love that number, that number for 400 meters to give someone a target to go, you know what, like that's something I want to achieve. And, you know, people who've gone before me kind of laid the path over one lap. And I'd like to think, well, I've put a bit of tarmac on that now. So who's next to come through? But I also know, like, to run those times, it takes an awful lot of work. It takes an awful lot of graft and an awful lot of choices. And, you know, if you can do those times, you're then going to be kind of on the elite side of 400 meters. And hopefully there's a couple of lads now coming through that are showing a bit of promise and a bit of potential. So hopefully they can, you know, get up to that level, and then we're going to have people in finals, and that's what you want.
Absolutely. You mentioned high volume. What was high volume back in the day? Because I have my own.
I'm not. Will you stop now? You're going to laugh at this. Like,
in my own head, I'm like, what's high volume?
Like, well, I'll give you an example. Like, I suppose in the winter, like one of our key sessions on the track would be like 6 by 300 meters. Okay. So like that would be a huge, you know, tough.
So 1.8K.
Oh yeah, 1.8K. Right. With a couple of breaks in between. So that's 2 sets of 3. So you'll be doing a rep, like you can probably, depend on the time of the year, but maybe 3 minutes between each rep. And then that'll be 2 sets of 3 and 6 minutes between the sets. Well, you're going fairly hard at it.
I know, yeah. I know that.
I got to big up the 400 meter sprinters there. But
and would you do like longer runs? Like, would you do a kilometer run as a go, or is it all just really hard and fast?
No, again, like, you know, probably from, say, October time through to, let's say, kind of December time, you will be doing a lot of base work. So, you know, you'll be doing kind of, you probably wouldn't even set foot on a track, you know, bar kind of like speed development and technical aspects to it. But we used to do an awful lot of stuff on grass. Now it was nice grass. It was like cricket pitch grass. And that could be like anything from 2 minutes, 3 minutes up to 5 minute kind of pyramids. And that's you putting in your aerobic base, you know, nothing too major, but like that's going to give you the base to be able to go and train and really kind of get into the lactic stuff. But you'll always be hitting that system as well. You're always anaerobic. So again, like that could be a Tuesday session, and then a Thursday you're going shorter, faster, and then a big kind of fartlek session on the weekend, which is a combination of like shuttle runs, hill runs, short hills, long hills, all of that sort of work combined into, maybe you probably build that up to somewhere about like kind of 50 minutes of actual work. But in terms of going anything kind of long, say 5Ks or anything like that, didn't exist. Absolutely didn't exist. I think around October, November, we might went for like, you know, a 20-minute recovery run, you know, and that would be it. But again, it's kind of like, it's very specialized. And that's the thing, you know, when I started doing more kind of endurance work recently, like, you know, I was so anaerobic, it was off the charts. Like I did a lactate test probably January of last year. And even before I started a warm up, I was hitting like 3 millimoles, you know, which is colossal, you know. And then I was hitting up, like I did the workout and I was up to like 18 millimoles per liter blood. Like, you know, like it's fascinating because, you know, essentially if I was to run a marathon, I'd be hitting the wall within the first hour. That's that, you know. So
give you 40 minutes.
I'd be 40 and then I'd done. Absolutely, you know. So, you know, it's quite interesting from that perspective how specialized sprinting can be. And even when I went and I did like park run, I can remember doing my first park run. And I've told this story before, but like I walked into the field in Marley Park and some lad came up to me and goes, "Oh, Gillick, great to see you. You should win this." And I remember thinking, hang on a second, I've never ran a 5K, but I absolutely took off. I went for it over the first. I didn't know, you know, I'd never ran this. And loads of people passed me, and a fella passed me pushing a buggy. And I was like, I was absolutely dying by the end of it. I was in bits, and people were actually amazed. And I still get it the odd time. About a year ago, I was in Marley and I finished, and I think I probably ran about 19 minutes or something. And one lad actually came up to me and goes, "Oh, what did you run?" I was like, "Oh, I think I was like, you know, low 19s. And he was like, "Really?" Because I thought you'd be running 16 minutes. And it's just a perception, you know, you're a runner, you can do everything. But yeah, so like load wise, like that's the way it would kind of work. Like we were 6 days a week, 1 day off, and we'd mainly run Tuesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays, and then kind of you've got your kind of prehab and rehab and kind of S&C all on top of that, afternoons and other days as well. That's kind of the way it would work.
And when you came back to running after retiring as a full-time athlete, where did you start? Did you go out and run 400 meters, or did you decide you were going to go down a bit more of an endurance path?
So it's funny actually. It actually kind of coincides with when I went back to counselling. I began to understand, like, you know what, the thing that was stopping me initially about going out and actually doing any form of exercise was my own ego. I was very much like I can remember Charlotte went to, like, she was working, she came home on a Monday and was like, "Oh, come on, let's go to kettlebells." And I was like, "I went to the Olympic Games, I'm not going to kettlebells." And she's like, "Come on, you're going to enjoy it." And I was like, "How much is it?" And she's like, "A tenner." I'm not paying someone €10. I'm David Gillick, like. And then she was like, "Shut up, come on." So I went down, and it was the best tenner I spent. He shouted abuse at me, and I loved it. And that was the issue. Like, my ego was probably, and I think sometimes when you're struggling with your mental health and stuff like that, and you're struggling with change, the ego is in overdrive, and I needed to get over myself. And I did eventually, and I went down kettlebells. It was all great fun. And then I was like, I'm going to go up and do a park run. And I kind of got into the habit, but I was also talking about what I was going through at the same time. And the parallels are very, very kind of, you can see them there clear as day. And that's where I went up, started doing a few 5Ks. And then after a couple of weeks, I was like, I'm going to go down to the track here. So I went down to Daniel Kilgallen's a sprints coach in Tala there, and jumped in with that group on a Tuesday and a Thursday, park run a Saturday. My week had structure, and I loved it. And then after a while, I was like, maybe I'll actually race again. So I hadn't raced in like nearly 4 years. And the truth be told, I was scared about running a 400 again. I didn't know what was going to happen. And I thought if I run, I get injured, I'm just going to open that wound and the whole thing will all start again. But I said, right, I'm going to race. And I didn't do a race in Ireland. Again, I didn't want people to really kind of analyze it or look at it. So I found a little race in Italy, and I had to beg to get into it. And I'm not making this up. And I've told this story before where I had to email. She was Italian, and I remember emailing her and giving her a big, "I'm David Gillick, I ran this, I ran that." Never said I'd retired. I said I had a few injuries, but I'm getting back on track now. And she responded and said, "No, I'm sorry, there's no lanes, so no space in the race." So I went back to her and I go, "Oh, look, I really kind of pulled at the heartstrings." And she obviously didn't know who I was and Googled me, and then responded through email and said, "Did you win Celebrity MasterChef Ireland?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she goes, "No problem, on you come." So I went over to Italy, paid my own way, and I was in the B race, and I ran 48 seconds. And then that was the start of, that was 2016, and I ended up racing that season. And I started training in January, and I got down to, like, I think I ran 46.2 that year, or so 46.3 or something like that. And I was very happy with that. And I made the team for the Europeans in the relay. And then I kind of, not that I retired, but I said goodbye to that level of the sport on my terms. And that was something that was of huge kind of meaning for me. And, the fact that I could do that. And then I was like dabbling a little bit in GA, and I started cycling a good bit through kind of lockdown and started doing cyclocross. And then I was like, I'll get into, I need to get fit. And people kept saying to me, "Oh, will you do the Masters athletics?" Because there's a huge master track and field scene here in Ireland. And I was like, I have zero interest in that, because I'll just be measuring myself off my previous time. So I wanted something a little bit different. And then I said, I'll do a marathon for the crack.
Well, I suppose it's something completely different. Nobody could compare you to anybody else, really, because you hadn't come from a marathon background or an endurance background. You'd come from a sprint background. You mentioned cyclocross there a couple of times. You did well in it too, actually, from what I remember.
Well, yeah.
You did. I remember seeing your results.
Brilliant sport. Absolutely
it's
fantastic
tough.
sport. It is so tough. It's a proper, like, full gas for your 50 minutes. Every course changes. The bike's up on your shoulder, a bit of rain and you're slipping and sliding, but it's fantastic. And that's the thrill of it, and I did a little bit last year, and I'll do more now this year as well. And, it's just, I just love the buzz. And like last year, I was doing all the Leinster leagues and stuff like that, and big numbers, and you've ABs and all this sort of crack. And then I was making progress, and then I was like, I'll do the nationals. And in my head, I'm thinking, it's like national athletics cross country. There's be hundreds in on the start line. And then I remember I threw the entry in, and then one of my mates, Paddy Daly, he texted me going, "Oh yeah, good to see you on the start list." And he sent it to me, and there was like 30 people on it. And I was like, what the hell is this? And I started looking at all the names, and I was thinking, no, something's not right here. There was like 30 people. And sure, lo and behold, I went up and did it. It was up in Armagh. And the mud, oh my God, the mud. But I think I won the first 100 meters. And after that, I was good.
Well, look, you were a sprinter. So, I mean, we were true to form. You're able to run. We know you can run. You're able to cycle. Can you swim?
Oh, I get this. I wouldn't be the most efficient swimmer. But apparently you can work on that. Is that true?
Well, it's just like everything else. With time, commitment, and dedication, you can become anything you want.
I'll be honest with you, like, you know, people have asked me this before. I'll never say never. It's probably one of these things that I would try.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Will you come across to triathlon?
I think, knowing me, like, I like a challenge and I like kind of changing things as I go. You know, I do enjoy cycling. I live in Ballantyre. We've got great roads, great hills, the Dublin Mountains, all that on our doorstep. And it's a fantastic kind of day out and I love it. I also love running. So, you know, I think probably comes down to time and making sure that I can actually but do you know what it is as well? I like doing stuff that I've no pedigree in. You know, I like kind of getting away from, say, the sprinting side of it. And that's what marathon and cyclocross I enjoyed. It was like, I've no benchmark. This is just new. This is something that's a bit of crack, and let's see what happens. So, you know, maybe. I'm not going to commit to anything, but maybe.
Okay, or maybe even gravel biking, because that's pretty cool too.
Yeah, apparently that's where it's all at these days, you know. And actually, like the cyclocross, I changed the tires on it and the wheels, and went up around. I actually went, and only recently I did 40k from my house all on gravel, up around like Ticknock and stuff like that. Amazing, beautiful.
It's so cool, isn't it? Though
it's brilliant, yeah. And again, the other thing as well, I know, like, you know, safety wise, you're off the road. There's no cars. But like the trails, the fire roads, and then linking into places like the Gap and all that, like you've so much on your doorstep. And what I like about it as well, it's slightly different. So it's not road, it's not mountain biking, it's something a little bit different. And yeah, very enjoyable.
Yeah, and if you come out the west of Ireland, then you have so many trails and track and trails and everything that you can decide whether you want to run or whether you want to cycle them. It's great fun, especially in the winter when you don't want to be going on your racing bike and out on the road with the skinny wheels. You have a little bit more comfort on the gravel bike in terms of the safety on the road, and also you're not going to slip and slide all over the place. Plus, you've no excuse when it's really windy and wet outside when you have a gravel bike, because really you can go out in all weathers.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, you briefly touched on MasterChef. I can't admit to having watched it, but you won it.
Yeah.
You beat off Aengus Nigrina and Maya Dunphy, I think, was it?
Yeah, that was it. That was the three of us in the final, yeah. Brilliant experience. And again, it's one of these things, like, I actually got asked to do that the day after I tore my Achilles in Australia. I was 29, approaching 30, and I retired, and that was it. And I remember going home to the apartment I was in. Charlotte was there, and, like, you know, my world had literally just fell apart, and tantrums. And I could remember, you know, I threw the mattress up, and it was just all of that. And I woke up the next day, and it was like an email from a production company saying, would you do this? Athletes tend to do well in it, blah, blah, blah. And I loved the show. I'd watched it everywhere I went in the world. So I said, I'm doing nothing else, I might as well. So that actually got me home originally. And Charlotte stayed over in Australia. She was working for the Canberra Raiders rugby league team. And yeah, like my main goal going into MasterChef was just don't get booted out first. Don't get kicked out first. National TV, just don't cry. And yeah, I loved it. It was great. It was, and like, I would have had an interest in food, to be fair. But I wouldn't have been cooking for friends or family. I was just cooking for myself. But I would have cooked from scratch quite a lot. Yeah, it was good. Like, I never again in my wildest dreams thought I would have won. My mum is even like, who did you pay off? There's no chance. But it was great. And again, like, it's funny because I opened up an awful lot of opportunity at a time when I was really struggling, you know, and I didn't know what I was going to do next. And I kind of referenced, you know, working with a couple of brands at that time. And that kind of probably, you know, 2 years later, when I decided to I need a bit of time out, I had one or two brands that I was working with in relation to kind of food and healthy lifestyle. I was like, look, I'll focus on these, and then I'll try and get my head around what I'm going to do. But it was brilliant. It was amazing. And even on the final, we were brought to Dubai, and I can remember we had 3 hours to cook a 3-course meal. So starter, main, and dessert. And I cooked quinoa encrusted lamb cutlets. So quinoa back then now was like, ooh, quinoa.
Notions.
Oh, complete notions. Absolutely. Now you can get it everywhere. They're like, oh, what's all that stuff? So I did quinoa encrusted lamb cutlets with a jus. So that's gravy, basically, homemade. And then the main course was pan-fried halibut. So a meaty whitefish, or, you know, a chunky whitefish on a bed of avocado and celery.
More notions.
Oh, complete notions. Like absolutely. Like celeriac romulade mayonnaise. Right. I know. I was like, where is all this coming from? And then because it was in Dubai, the Burj Khalifa, I think, was built around about then. So I made my own meringue with a creme chantilly. Do you know what that is?
I do, yeah.
Yeah,
I
creamy.
do, of course.
With a bit of fruit, and I made it in a tower. And I think I had like a, what do you call it? A raspberry.
Coulis.
That's the
Coulis.
one. I was going to say Coolio, and I was like, no, what's a Coolio? And I won it. Yeah.
Mighty. Yeah. The thing about being on MasterChef as well is you were probably very well known in sporting circles and obviously, in general, right? But then you go on MasterChef and suddenly you become a household name and then you win it. And it's like, here's that lad that was the sprinter that was at the Olympics and won 2 European medals.
I'm not going to lie. Like, I remember in the aftermath, I'd come home. So I was living back with mum and dad. And I went out to Dundrum Town Centre. And I remember kind of like prior to that, you get a couple of lads looking at you, because they might be into sport or people who are into sport might kind of go, oh, there's your man. Now it was like, all mums and all and like grannies and all. They were kind of going, nudging each other, going, there's. And I remember kind of going, this is weird. A whole different demographic, like recognizing me. And like food, and they were coming up going like, I remember I was in the shops and a woman stopped me and goes, oh, well, you were your man off the telly, MasterChef. And she says, I have the family coming over on Sunday. Do you have any?
Will I cook?
Yeah, the Sunday roast. And I was going, what? Like, how? Like, no, I don't. She actually thought I was a chef. And I was like, I'm no more than a chef. Like, I've just skipped that part and became MasterChef. Like, oh, God. But,
brilliant. And what's your go-to meal now if you're having a dinner party? What would you cook?
I do like a sheet pan. So what I would do is prawn and chicken and chorizo or chorizo, whatever kind of way you pronounce it, on a sheet pan. So very basic. But I love kind of just making one pot dishes again with the kids and stuff like that. So yeah, like that's kind of probably the go-to at the moment,
And have you an air fryer?
No, I don't have an air. I know it's shocking. What am I doing? Our neighbours next door have a little fella the same age as my daughter. So he came in, they were playing, and then his dad was shouting over the fence, going, "Oh, Adam, your dinner!" And my wife Charlotte went out and got it, and it was sausages he'd cooked in the air fryer. And we were like, "Give us a shot of these." Can we get an air fryer? Yeah.
And listen, from one reality TV show to another, Hell Week. I was obsessed with Hell Week. I love Hell Week. We've had some Hell Week former participants on the show as well. It is intense. And it's amazing.
Yeah, like do you know it's actually quite. It's hard to explain to people how intense and how tough it is. Like, after the show, people say, "God, that looks fierce tough on the TV," and you're kind of going, "Yeah, it is." Like, it's so hard to explain how intense it is. Like when you watch it on TV, you're only watching that hour, and you're getting like the Sunday game version of it. Whereas for us in reality, it was 24/7. It was just. You were always on edge, and out of the whole course of the week, less than 7 hours sleep. Calories were like, I'd say maybe 1,200 to 1,500 calories, and all the exercise, the no sleep. It was just relentless, and I have to say, it was probably one of the it was the hardest week of my life, absolutely, but one of the best weeks of my life. It was such a rewarding feeling, and I think, to be honest, everyone that was on my show, they were doing it for their own personal reasons, and I think for me. Like, I'd always questioned post-career, did I have that edge about me, or was that gone? The things that made me a good athlete and the things that like motivated me and inspired me. Now that I'd retired, had I lost all that? Was that gone? And I think I just wanted to see if I had that edge about me, and that was the most rewarding thing. And you're challenged mentally, emotionally, physically. But probably one of the hardest tasks was they came in, and not a whole lot of this made TV, but they challenged us on kind of our own self-awareness. And we had to we were given a questionnaire on our own self-awareness. And then we had to evaluate everybody else in the room. We had to write about ourselves. Yeah. And it wasn't about medals. It wasn't about performances. It was like, who are you? Who are you? And I can remember sitting there going, geez, how do I answer this question? And it was just such a reflective kind of moment that, maybe think about the journey I was on, and maybe think about me as a person, never mind running or athletics or what maybe defined me and gave me identity. And I think, it was definitely one of those moments that I always think back to, because I got a lot out of it. And I think that's sometimes like Ray Goggins, he kept saying at the start, like, you're going to have to search within your soul to your core. He kept saying these things. And at that time, you're kind of going, what's he talking about? But that's exactly it. And I think, you know, to go through a process like that, yes, the physical is important, but it's all about up here in the head. And it made me actually think about, like, to what level are we actually living? You know, are we even hitting like 50% of our potential? Like, where are we? And if someone had said, here's the week that's going to unfold, I would have said, no chance. I'm not going to be able to do that. No way. But it's amazing when you're in that environment, and, you know, it's almost a matter of life and death, you know, what you can actually produce and what you can actually do. It's fascinating.
And so from MasterChef to Hell Week, Dancing with the Stars, maybe, potentially?
No, yeah, like
tall enough. You have the twinkle toes from the sprinting.
Well, there you go.
Can you dance?
Yeah, after a few points, I can dance. Do you know what? I think I'm off the hook on this one because I don't know if that's actually happening again. Would you believe I'll be honest with you, I turned it down. Did
you? I actually was just totally randomly asking you about Dancing with the Stars.
The first year it was on, I turned it down because it was so close to MasterChef, and I was kind of thinking, oh, I'm going to be this like reality TV slut, like going to everything, you know. And then I was like, no. And then I got asked to do it again, and I think we were expecting I can't remember, one of the kids around then. It just didn't fit. But yeah, no, like, I don't know, like it'd be some crack. Jesus.
You'd want to be flying around the dance floor there. You'd definitely be pushing out 3 mmol of lactate.
Imagine the lactate up to the eyeballs, yeah.
David, if you look back at everything that you've achieved so far, what would you say would be the highlights of your life so far? They don't have to be in sport, just life in general. Yeah,
like, I think, if I can be brutally honest, I think, you know, probably post-career, the last couple of years, I think, you know, and I don't really harp on too much about the mental health aspect, but it played a pivotal role in who I was and made me really kind of think about, like, what's important in life. And, like, by doing that, I think showing an element of vulnerability was probably one of my biggest strengths, and asking for help. And, you know, I suppose being male, come from sport, faster, fitter, stronger, all that, it was easy to hide behind for a few years. But I think by actually asking for help, it made me learn about myself. It made me understand who I was as a person. And, you know, we've 3 young kids, and, you know, I'm 40 this year, and I want to really enjoy life, and I want to do things that I'm passionate about. And, you know, I now do look back at my career with fondness, and I look back to how privileged I was, and, you know, to get the opportunities to represent my country. And probably in that kind of aspect, making a world final in 2009, I didn't win any medals, but there was always a huge goal for me, was to try and make a global sprint final, which, you know, from Ireland, we hadn't done in nearly a century. So to be able to do that is probably like one of my biggest and proudest moments. And yeah, I think they're kind of like, you know, like the MasterChefs and the Hell Week. I have to say, like, the Hell Week was probably, in terms of kind of going back and really putting yourself out of your comfort zone. It's not an easy thing to do. And then you do it on national TV. And again, I was like, don't cry. But
and did you cry?
Well, what actually happened, right? So
no, don't be making excuses now. Did you cry or did you not cry?
I did. Will you let me answer the question?
Okay.
When we were told we had passed and stuff like that, we then had to walk up all those steps, and then you come out. And I remember it vividly. It was a Saturday morning, literally last Saturday, a year ago. That's when it was filmed, that whole week. And I was actually in Cork. That's the amazing thing. I went and I visited the place last week. I can remember coming out, and we had two of the kind of crew there, and it was all over, and a big hug. And that's when it's just like, what has just happened? And then we have to have a debrief with the psychologist before they send you off. And that at that moment, that's when the family and Charlotte and the kids began to come into my head again, because you had to. All right, you had to push them away, because if I start thinking about them throughout that week, I would have crumbled. And that's when, you know, everything just came to the fore. And yeah, that's when I shed a couple of tears. But everyone did. Like, that's the thing. It's just so demanding. But I didn't do it when the cameras were there.
The kids, you mentioned them quite a bit throughout the chat. Are they following in Daddy's footsteps?
Yeah, they're into their sport. You know, right now, like, Oscar's 7, so he's at the age where he can kind of get involved with clubs. So he's doing the athletics. He's up at Dundrum. He's doing soccer locally. He's doing Gaelic football, a bit of rugby. Like, I think at this age, like, I'd follow in what my parents did with me, and give them as much sport, different movements, all that sort of stuff as possible, and let's see where it lands. You know, it's all about fun and just getting them out and getting them active. And Olivia now, she's 5, so she's getting involved in activities as well. So like, I think when I look at it, like what really kind of works with my kids anyway is when you give them the attention and you're present with them physically and mentally, and that's kind of, you know, even when we head into kind of summertime, that's like one of the things I want to do more of. And yeah, look, if they want to run, I'll happily support them. I think any sport that makes you and enables you to travel the world, you learn, you grow, and you know, I think an element of kind of competitiveness in there is no harm as well. So yeah, let's see what happens.
Well, David, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. It was an insightful, entertaining and a fun chat as well. And I wish you the very best of luck with everything. I'm sure our paths will cross again somewhere, either running or on a microphone, or you might even be on a start line or a finish line of a triathlon at some point. # no pressure.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you said finish line. Okay, finish line.
I meant after doing the swim, bike and run and crossing the finish line, and I'll call you across the finish line. I don't mean being on the mic beside me, but hey, never say never.
No, brilliant. Thanks a million for having us on, and enjoyed the chat.
Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this episode. You can get in touch with any feedback or guest suggestions by emailing me on trytalkingsport@gmail.com. If you would like to hear more great episodes of the podcast, be sure to check them out on our website or wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow all of our activities and podcasts on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn and Instagram. If you have any feedback or guest suggestions, please email me on trytalkingsport@gmail.com. I really would love to hear from you. Until next time, thanks for listening. Stay safe, keep smiling, and remember to look for fun and adventure in every day.